It is my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar focused on youth and species conservation action. I really want to thank you for being with us here today. Youth is such an important topic for us. It's not just for us, we don't see youth just as a stakeholder group. For us, youth are the future of conservation. They are the future and they are also the present. Across the world, young people are driving change, developing innovative solutions, and taking action to protect biodiversity. Recognizing the importance of youth perspectives and expertise, last year, IUCN launched its first ever Youth Advisory Committee, which builds on years of championing the voices of young people through its programs and resolutions. While many global agendas, including the Global Biodiversity Framework, the GBF, are recognizing the importance of involving youth to achieving transformational change, this has not yet been met by ample opportunities, platforms, and funding for young people to participate in practice. We know that turning a passion for nature into a lifelong career is not always easy. Many young conservationists face barriers, limited opportunities, lack of funding, and the need for stronger mentorship and guidance. Recognizing these challenges, the Fundación Segre Conservation Action Fund, administered by IUCN Save Our Species, has been supporting the new generations of field ecologists in the last 4 years by providing research support grants to students in conservation. The young conservationists you will hear from today are direct beneficiaries from these grants. Through this webinar, we aim to celebrate their journeys, share their inspiring stories, and explore ways to further strengthen youth engagement in conservation. So today's webinar is not just about listening, it's about taking action. So whether you are a young conservationist looking for guidance, an organization seeking to enhance youth engagement, or a donor exploring ways to support emerging leaders, your role is critical. We encourage you to ask questions, share insights, and connect with others throughout this session. Before we begin, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our distinguished panelists, including representatives from the IUCN Youth Advisory Committee, the IUCN Species Survival Commission Young Professional Task Force, and the inspiring young conservationists joining us today. I would also like to acknowledge Fundación Segre for their invaluable support in fostering youth leadership in conservation, and of course, a heartfelt welcome of all of you attending. With that, I would like to introduce our facilitator, Ilad Vivas Lopez, co-chair of the IUCN Species Survival Commission Young Professional Task Force. I pass on the word to you, Ilad, and I thank you very much for leading this interesting discussion. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Anna, for the introduction and for this broad overview of the topics we're going to talk about today. But first, diving into these topics, we need to do 2 things. The first one is thanking Professor Luigi Boitani for his participation on behalf of Fundación Segre. Your support is primordial on fostering youth leadership and engagement in conservation. The second one is understanding that it's key to understand how we mean, who we mean when we talk about young professionals in this space. And according to IUCN Youth Strategy, young professionals are individuals between 18 and 35 years old who work in a particular space, in this case, biodiversity conservation. So, why are we giving the spotlights to young professionals today? And the answer for this question is rather simple. It's because we are concerned about the future, as we are experiencing firsthand the consequences of decisions made by previous generations, which shape our opportunities and challenges. Also, we're active and passionate advocates for sustainable ways of living, and we are taking actions in our communities today. In addition, More than 50% of the world population are young people, and most of them are living in the global south, where challenges are large. These challenges are even more concerning in light of the study released this year by Saga and Gaston entitled Extinction of Experience Among Ecologists. This study highlights the decline of field-based research, hands-on learning, and the direct engagement with nature among conservation scientists. The decline in fieldwork experience among ecologists is a growing concern that could undermine scientists' knowledge, conservation efforts, and public engagement with nature. However, many young people are taking actions all around the globe. This is the case of the speakers we are having in this webinar. So for the next 90 minutes, we will hear about 3 young conservationists have turned their early experience into impactful careers. We will also explore how IUCN can better support and empower youth in conservation. And finally, we will engage in a dynamic discussion on the transformative change needed for enhanced youth engagement in conservation. Therefore, we will hear in the first part the journey of youth-driven conservation efforts, opportunities, challenge, and success, giving the voice to Mr. Agus Jati, Mr. Vivek Chandran, and Ms. Yiselle Cano. Then we will have the second part addressed by Ms. Diana Garlytska, Ms. Ibukunoluwa Balogun, and Professor Luigi Boitani. Then we will have a panel discussion where the panelists will expand on their ideas. And after that, we will have a Q&A session for all the attendees have to address their questions to the panelists. Finally, we will have a closing remarks and hope you have a nice webinar and learn a lot of these outstanding speakers. So now we can move into part 1 and hear about the journey of youth-driven conservation efforts, opportunity, challenges, and success. So we want to welcome Mr. Agus and Mr. Vivek Chandran from India, so he can start this section. Vivek, the spotlight is yours.
Yes. Hi, Ilad. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, so I'll briefly walk you through my conservation journey. For me, it all started in 2003 when, as a 9th grade student, I was taken to a hill station called Munnar in Kerala at the southern tip of India as a part of nature education camp. So till that point of time, I was not, involved in any of the nature conservation activities. This was something new to me. Okay, so I was in the wilderness for the first time. So I was watching birds for the first time. I was exposed to wilderness for the first time in this nature education trip. So I returned as a very changed person. It wasn't the same person that I returned when I must confess wholeheartedly that when I was going for this trip, the only thing that I had in mind was having fun. But the trip really changed me. There was a nature education officer who was associated with the Forest Department of Kerala. He introduced us to the birds and wildlife scene at a national park called Erviculam National Park in Kerala. So there I met many bird species like the Eurasian kestrel shown here. So that really inspired me. Till that point of time, the only birds known to me were crows, miners, and other common species that are found around in India very commonly. So this trip actually opened a door to a new world to me. So I came back a different person. So once I was back, I started hunting for books on birds. I started exploring wilderness areas around me. I started watching birds, and to this day, I remain a very passionate bird watcher. And gradually, my interest shifted to other organisms in the wilderness also. And today, I study dragonflies and damselflies, Odonata. And you can see here, even in my college days, with binoculars hung around my neck. I used to participate in various biodiversity surveys organized by the Biodiversity Board and Kerala Forest Department. Even in the colleges where I studied, I used to tag along my friends with me. I used to try to keep them engaged and inspired about the wilderness areas and the importance for their conservation. And this is where I stand today in 2025. I am an ordinator researcher with a special interest in the diversity and ecology. As a part of an NGO called Society for Ordinate Studies, I take part in various outreach activities. I also write a lot of popular articles along with scientific articles because I believe it is very essential to take everyone into confidence for a movement like conservation to be effective. Next slide, please. Yeah, but it was not all rainbows and roses. My conservation journey was riddled with a lot of hurdles. So the first and foremost of those hurdles was the career switch that I had to do. Because right after my education, my formal education was completed, I had to find a job. And in this part of the world, the safest job is a government job. So I had to try for that. And within a year or so, I landed a job with the government office. And there I remained for over a year. So everyone around me was happy. My friends were happy. My family was happy. But everyone except me were happy. So because I was not happy because I was not able to pursue research, I used to look at birds flying across my, the government office and feel sorry for myself because I was not able to do what I loved the most. But then I discussed with my family and my life partner especially, and they were very supportive. And with their support, I was able to take this crucial jump from a government office to the wilderness. So that career switch was very crucial in my career. And the next hurdle that I faced was that I had to face a bias in conservation priorities. So in India, like in most of the developing world, the most of the funds for conservation and biodiversity research is routed to large animals like tigers and charismatic animals like elephants, and organisms like dragonflies and damselflies usually receive very low attention. So this is something that I had to grapple with. And most of our labs were not well equipped to conduct biodiversity research. So we needed to find funds for buying equipment by ourselves. So that is another challenge. And the personnel, especially who had to work in the field, were not very well trained. So if I had to recruit someone to work with me, I had to train them from scratch. And like in most parts of the world, the funding is very, very limited. So these are some of the institutions where I had to apply for funding, and invariably I got rejected in all these places. So that was a learning curve for me. I had to keep applying for funds. So, and it was very competitive since there are very few institutions as outlined here. It was very competitive. So that was another hurdle. Next slide, please. So finally, this is what turned things around for me. My PhD got funded by the government of Kerala, Directorate of Environment and Climate Change, using the funds of which I studied ordinator diversity and ecology in the central Kerala. So in the wetlands of central Kerala, this was funded by the government of Kerala. And I did my research at Christ College, Iringalkuda in Kerala. And I have submitted my PhD thesis right now, very recently. And at the same time, I was also engaged with an NGO called Society for Ordinate Studies, which was focused on the study of dragonflies and damselflies, their research and conservation of their habitats. So while associating with this NGO, I was able to take along the laypersons with me to the field. I took children to the field. I took classes to various stakeholders like the Biodiversity Board members and the Kerala Forest Department officials. So, and also as part of this NGO, I had actually started exploring various wilderness areas in the Western Ghats. And this is where the funding from Foundation Segre IUCN SOS came in handy. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is the project that was funded by the research support grant of Foundation Segre and IUCN SOS, understanding the ecology of a damselfly species called Dysparneura apicalis. You can see the damselfly perched here. It is not commonly called the black-tipped bamboo tail. It is very restricted in distribution. It is found only in very, very scattered locations within the Western Ghats. And even after 100 years of its description, almost nothing was known about its ecology. So I was able to explore its breeding behavior, its association with the riparian vegetation, and its status in one of the last strongholds, that is the Kuruva island chain in Western Ghats, that is in Wayanad district of Kerala. So a lot of people visit this island chain as part of as tourists, and I was also able to educate some of them. Many of them, I led sessions for them, so that really helped a lot. And I was able to train these people. You can see my team here, knee deep in water, all happy with the equipment in hands, ready to catch dragonflies. So it's not just fun that we had. We were also able to publish our results. You can see one of the first publications came out was on the Odonata diversity of Kurwa Islands, with a special focus on the ecology of the species Bisperonura apicalis. And I was also able to convince the officials that dragonflies and damselflies are also important in the ecosystems, because they are indicator species and they are very important. They play a very important role in the food chain in most ecosystems, especially in freshwater ecosystems. So we were also able to find some new species. You can see the right-hand corner. That is a species called Epithermis wayanadensis. It's been discovered. That was the first species that we discovered from this landscape. And it was actually used as a election mascot to spread awareness about biodiversity conservation and to raise people's awareness to vote for general elections in Kerala. So all this was possible because of the funding, the initial funding that I got from Fondazione Segre IUCN SOS. This really kickstarted my career. Until date, I have been able to describe 6 new species of Odonata, dragonflies and damselflies from this landscape of Western Ghats, the biodiversity hotspot. And I would like to continue my research in this area, studying the evolution and ecology of Odonata in this landscape. I once again take this opportunity to thank all those people who stood with me, especially the funding agency which made my conservation career possible. Thank you once again. I pass on to the next speaker.
Thanks for sharing your journey, Vivek. Now, we are thrilled to have Yiselle Cano from Colombia, who is going to talk about her insights about the conservation in South America. Yiselle, the mic is all yours.
Hey, thank you. Hello, my name is Yiselle. I'm a biologist from Colombia, and I work with damselflies, the same as Vivek. I think my path in conservation was born from my love to the Amazon region. I was born and raised in the Caribbean coast of Colombia, in Barranquilla, a place really different from the Amazon. I know everyone is maybe amazed when they meet this forest for the first time, but I think for me it was like magic, because forests in the Caribbean coast are completely different, if they are at all. So that's how it started. When I was 18, I got on a scholarship to attend university. So I moved from Barranquilla, my city, to Bogota. And it was there that I got interested in damselflies and dragonflies. After I graduated in 2013, I took a trip to the Amazon with some of my friends to celebrate that graduation. And when I saw that river, I knew it was like love at first sight. It seems funny, but it was like that. I saw that river, I saw that forest, and I knew I wanted to live there, to work there, to meet it. So next slide. But studying insects is tough everywhere, and Colombia is no exception. And research and funding tend to favor vertebrates, although invertebrates and insects are way more diverse, but they are also way less studied. That's kind of sad, because they are amazing animals. So this bias is even more evident in tropical regions, where insects are way less studied, because of the lack of funding that we have in Latin America and in the tropics in general. So this lack of funding also means a lack of specialists in every area, but in insects, it is like even worse, or at least here. So in Colombia, the first studies of Odonata, of dragonflies, were made by foreign specialists that came to the country, took the animals, and studied them. So the actual like emergence of local odontology started in the early 2000s when some of the first laboratories dedicated to damselflies started to appear. And I was lucky enough to be part of one of these labs. I have a teacher that worked exclusively on damselflies and dragonflies, and I learned a lot from him. But as you can see in the two maps I put here for you, my beloved Amazon region is still unexplored. Like the amazing moment we're having with damselflies and dragonflies in Colombia and Latin America has not hit the same in the Amazon forest. And there are so many places that haven't been explored. In Colombia, for example, you can see the map here on the right, where there are documented all known localities from literature and our local natural history museums. You can see from the Amazon region, there's like a huge gap of some areas that we don't know nothing about them, about what's happening in there in terms of insects, of damselflies and dragonflies, but also in terms of threats to this forest. So there is some menaces, and our species are in risk. And as this area is underexplored, some of these species might even disappear before we get the chance to know them. So next slide. So what happened for me to be here? My journey in conservation started in the hand of a friend. So when I was asked about what impacted my career, I immediately know I have to share her with you guys. She's Jenny Lee. She's a friend from Barranquilla too. And she was the one to help me connect my passion for exploring the Colombia's forest with biodiversity conservation. She was one of the first, if not the first person to speak about dragonfly conservation in Colombia. So in 2017, she was helping to organize an IUCN Red List workshop in Bogota, and she invited me to be part of it. This workshop was led by Federico Lozano, the head of the Dragonfly Specialist Group in Latin America, in coordination with the recently founded SOL, the Latin America Society of Odontology. I think this was the thing that helped me to connect with conservation. During this workshop, we learned how the extinction risk of species were assessed. And after this workshop, I got involved with Johnny Lee and some other Latin American odontologists to evaluate the conservation status of all the known species at that time in Latin America. So one thing that came to my attention with this assessment was the lack of information that we have about almost every species. Not only on population trends that were mostly unknown, even for least treated species, but in some cases, even basic ecological data was missing for many dragonflies and damselfly species. So it was a way I think I can help, because I love to be in field exploring, and I understand that my small piece of data about where these dragonflies were, in what kind of rivers, of lakes they were, was going to help to preserve species, because that information was missing. So not long after this workshop, I started working in a project with some lab mates. I started identifying the odonates from Guinea, which is a department located in the most northern part of the Amazon forest in Colombia. It's in an area mostly unexplored, like most of the Amazon in Colombia. But what I found was like some of the most incredible damselflies I've ever seen, like this two I'm just showing you. Yellow-nympha magoi was a species rediscovered there. It is data deficient, actually, and we found some stable populations of this species there in Guinea in the project I'm going to show you next. Next slide. So, Dragonflies of Guinea, the search of Pteranodon de Marmelsi, was born after we completed that work on the checklist of Guinea specimens. Unfortunately, well, the place turned out to be one of the most diverse departments in Colombia, but it also shows that some of the most rare species we recorded in Guinea were potential risk due to several factors, but one of the ones that I want to bring here was the lack of solid waste management that had some areas, and some of the most important areas that were sampled. So one of the damselfly species we got here was Pteranodon de Marmelsi. It is an endangered species. It was originally described from museum specimens collected in Amazonas department. So we wanted to found a stable population in Guinea to start recording everything, because we didn't know anything about the species, just the coordinates where it was located. So this species was recorded from a single specimen in Densicoira stream, which is a stream that runs between these two mountains in the picture. The place is amazing, I know. These mountains are called Cerro Pajarito and Cerro Mono, and this place is within the territory of the Puinabe people. So the project was developed in collaboration with the Remanso indigenous community that is in the foot of one of these mountains. Next slide. The goal was to find a stable population of Pteranodon de Marmelsi to work with, but unfortunately, we haven't found that population yet, but I won't give up, I can assure you that. So the proposed population size calculations were done with some of the other Pteranodon species found there that also have the same ecological requirements of our endangered Pteranodon de Marmelsi. And this part of the project became part of the biology thesis of Tatiana Flores, a student I had the privilege of advising with this project. But it doesn't stop there. This project also has a strong community-driven component, which I think is like amazing. For me, it was. Besides holding sessions about ecological data, biology of damselflies and dragonflies, we work with the community to create a local field guide. The idea of this field guide was not just to document the species depth, but to have this information in the Puinabe language. So it was available for the people that live with the damselflies, not just for us researchers. So this process was not only to share this biological knowledge of diversity and distribution, but also to preserve the Puinabe language, and that they can connect better with the biodiversity. And it can also provide them a resource, because most of these people live from tourists and has some like nice and established community-based tourist initiative. So we wanted them to start talking not only about birds or fishes, but about damselflies and dragonflies when they show their territory to tourists. So what did we have done? What have we done? We established Heteragrion, the Marmelsi and Heteragrions in general, as the Puinabe damselflies. They are now known as Dum Puinabe. My Puinabe is pretty bad, but they are really patient with me. So they are now the symbols of the odonates of the remanso territory. I can show you some other examples of the names we worked with them. For example, there is Dum Sompat, which mean damselfly with long tail, for some perilestid, which are really long abdomen damselflies. But beyond that, we also found some nice information about diversity and distribution. We discovered one new species for science. This species was collected during the day of my birthday. I collected on my birthday, so it was really cool. But we also have 8 new records for the Guinea department, 6 new records of species for Colombia, and some of the most amazing local odontologists from the Puinabe people, which is really nice. They are really good at seeing and collecting damselflies. We also found some data deficient species, as I told you. So the information we've gathered here will help improve future assessments of these species with more accurate data. So I believe that every small piece of information about each dragonfly and damselfly we found here can contribute to species conservation. And that's why I'm so grateful for the opportunity this grant gave me to help protect the Amazon biodiversity. That's what I wanted to share with you today.
Thanks, Yiselle. That was inspiring. And now we're happy to give the stage to Agus Jati from Indonesia, who is going to share with us his story as a conservationist. Agus, the mic is all yours.
Thank you so much. I want to begin with some of my favorite quotes. The best way to predict the future is to create it. However, I often found that what I wanted for the future were beyond my reach. It seems impossible. But I also remember countless occasions when those impossible dreams became reality. As Nelson Mandela said, it always seems impossible until it's done. We can make the impossible possible because we are not the products of our circumstances. We are the products of our decisions. Today, please allow me to share personal stories on how I realized my passion and led me into this conservation world. Next slide, please. Since I was little, I love watching documentaries, and I was inspired by that. As a kid, my hobby was catching bats, collecting insects, or catching snakes. One of my friends told me that his parents told him not to hang out with me because of my unusual interest with wildlife. I was labeled as a weird kid. I wasn't aware that I have an unusual interest. I wasn't even aware that it was an interest. Until one night, my father and I had an argument over TV programs. He wanted to watch a live football game, but I wanted to watch a documentary about animals. Of course, I lost and couldn't watch the documentary. But then I was very angry and I locked myself in my room. That was a very important night because in my room, I asked myself, why am I so upset? It was just a TV program about animals. Then I had a flashback about my past experiences with animals and how excited I was when I saw them. That night, I realized that wildlife is my passion and doing research and conservation is my dream. To achieve that, I would need to go to a university. That was an impossible dream. Going to university, let alone for master's and PhD, was too luxurious. Also, I had no idea what kind of university program I should attend that can make me work with wildlife. Then, somehow, I was introduced to Faculty of Forestry. Right away, I felt that is where I belong. I was lucky because I was among the first person in our family to have a chance to attend a university. But when my relatives discovered that I was about to enter Faculty of Forestry, they criticized me. How can you make money by working in the forest? They asked. Or forestry? Do you want to be a Tarzan? That's how they mocked me. But my father believed in me. He told me and all my siblings to follow our heart. I listened to him. So that's what I did. That's what I do. Because we are the products of our decisions. Unexpectedly, my passion towards nature led me to who I am today. I am now part of the 0.02% of Indonesian population. I am an introvert, so being in a new environment with new people is always intimidating. English and writing are among my top weaknesses. But I did my master's and PhD overseas. So I got my academic degrees by overcoming my weaknesses. I just got my PhD from the University of Maine in the United States last August. I am also very stubborn. When I started my PhD, my supervisor offered me to join his project in the United States. But I said no. I insisted that my research must be in Indonesia. But there was a problem. My lab didn't have any project in Indonesia. That means I had to apply funding myself. I'm glad with my decision because I believe my PhD research will contribute something to biodiversity conservation in Indonesia. I will share with you a brief story about that research. In 2022, the IUCN SOS, through the Foundation Sacred Conservation Action Fund mechanism, along with some other institutions, awarded me research grants to perform the first ecological study of the Togian babirusa, which was part of my PhD project. What is Togian babirusa and why? Babirusa is a very distinct animal, as seen in our camera trap video here. This is also among the first published videos of the species. The Togian babirusa is endangered and endemic to the Togian archipelago, Indonesia. They are also nationally protected. However, this babirusa is poorly studied, so we knew very little about this species. Because of this knowledge gap, developing an effective conservation strategy seems daunting. That's why I did this study. We distributed camera traps throughout the entire species distribution range, so our study covered the entire population. Then we assessed the species habitat selection, demography, and behavior. I will not detail the results of this study, but I want to highlight some concerning findings. Our study strongly suggests that forest coverage is critical for the species. Therefore, forest loss is among the most significant threats to the species. The national park design, however, is not optimal to protect the forest. On this map, blue areas are non-protected forest, which is about 50% of the remaining forest. Red areas are agriculture and human settlements within the national park boundary. Most people here depend on agricultural practices for their livelihood. So as the population grows, demand for agricultural land also grows. This also made people view the babirusa as their enemy, because babirusa can eat crops. We recorded many videos like this. Take a look at their legs. They were severed from snares. Many farmers I met said that they will not hesitate to kill babirusa because they consider this species as pests. This video is a strong indication that human-wildlife conflict is also a serious threat to this babirusa. Now that we are aware about the situation, we need to work together to address this. In 2024, we published the result of our study, along with a guideline to perform monitoring of this babirusa. When executing this project, I tried to communicate with the IUCN SSC Wild Pig Specialist Group because I believe by actively engage with the related specialist group, I hope this study could help improve the conservation of the species. Then they invited me to join the group, so I am honored that I am now also a member of the IUCN SSC Wild Pig Specialist Group. I will end my talk by acknowledging my scholarships, our collaborators, and our sponsors. Also, I want to highlight the tremendous contribution of our local assistants. They are local villagers. They are presented in these pictures. They don't have university degree. Many of them didn't even finish high school. They had no prior experiences with this kind of research, but they are now very skillful with camera trapping. They helped me as if it was their own project. Without them, there was no way this project can be done. My experiences with them implies that local participation is essential for the success of conservation. With that, thank you so much. Back to you, Ilad.
Thanks, Agus, for that. It was an outstanding talk. Now, having heard all of these wonderful stories, we can move on to the second part of this webinar, which is focused on how to empower young conservationists. So please welcome Diana Garlytska on behalf of the Youth Advisory Committee. Diana, the mic is yours.
Thank you so much, Ilad, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm a chair of IUCN Youth Advisory Committee and really excited to tell you about the beautiful journey of experiencing the very powerful youth engagement that we have here. It's 75 years of IUCN history and decades of the union propagating and supporting youth inclusion and youth leadership in nature conservation. And even if we look into the very recent history of what was happening in the past years, in the lead up to the previous Congress, and you may know that IUCN is working on 4-year cycles, and World Conservation Congresses of IUCN at the end and the beginning of each cycle. The last one took place in Marseille in France, and in the lead up to that Congress, Global IUCN Youth Summit took place in 2021 and was a fully online event with unprecedented number of participants. 15,000 people from across the globe have registered for the event and participated, and that means really the highest number of event attendance, frankly, in the whole of the history. It's the attention to youth, but it's also those circumstances of COVID removing the, so to say, traditional boundaries of youth participation in important happenings. Youth is often faced with such barriers as funding, visa limitations, chaperoning for minors, and when it was fully digital event, all of these restrictions, all of these barriers were naturally removed. And this resulted in such fantastic engagement of young professionals that was created in that summit. It was hours of youth-led webinars and talks and sessions, panel discussions, and intergenerational sessions that crystallized in key themes and topics and were shaped in the youth outcome statement presented in the Marseille Global Youth Summit physical part in Marseille Congress, and had received a response from IUCN leadership initiating the writing and design of IUCN Youth Strategy, a document that is accessible to everyone publicly, and I encourage you to have a look into it. And as a result of the youth strategy being designed, the first outcome of it was actually establishing IUCN Youth Advisory Committee. Over to the next slide, please. The youth strategy is guided by key 4 principles to ensure the efforts are union-wide, and we mean IUCN commissions, all the 7 of them, the Secretariat, IUCN member organizations, including IPOs, and the broader audience. Another key principle of the youth strategy is mainstreaming engagement of young people into IUCN program, projects, and governance. Is the different initiatives across all the regional offices of IUCN, programs and activities that look for ways to embed young people, young professionals into those activities. Young people must co-design and lead youth strategy and its implementation, and that means all of us, young professionals, speaking up, sharing our opinions and voices, and contributing to the implementation of the youth strategy through all of these different constituencies within the union. Youth strategy outcomes are realistic, measurable, and sufficiently resourced, and I will tell you in a second, in the next slides, what Youth Advisory Committee is doing so that to ensure that there are numbers and fact-based youth strategy that we implement. Over to the next one, please. Having established Youth Advisory Committee, we're now having this team of young professionals from across the globe that really represent this union-wide approach in the implementation of IUCN youth strategy. Young professionals that come from all the 7 commissions, IPO representatives, member organization representatives, and 2 representatives from the Secretariat. All of us together as a team, we promote IUCN youth strategy across all the parts of the union that we feed back to, and measure and communicate the outcomes, us being there in key events of the RCF cycle last year, IUCN Leadership Forum, COP16 and COP29, so that to speak about the youth engagement in the union, communicate about all the possibilities that there are for young professionals, but also making the union and possibilities for people, young professionals, closer to them. Enhancing resourcing and capacity, and that is advocating for possibilities for youth in different shape and form. And with that, we can move on to the next slide. You see here the very first cohort, Youth Advisory Committee, was established only in April last year. And while we're still fresh, under 1 year, there is a lot happening in the YAC world. Youth Advisory Committee has successfully participated in 6 regional conservation fora of IUCN last year, the leadership forum, and the COP16 and COP29, as I mentioned. We also have partnered with several global organizations on their youth initiatives, contributing to them. There was a lot of work done on making our work visible and accessible to you. You have here a QR code to IUCN Engage page of Youth Advisory Committee. We're also present, and you can find all the information of who is perhaps your contact within the commission that you are maybe a member of on YAC, a team that is presented on the landing page of IUCN. And we very much encourage you to stay in touch with us, for instance, through YAC Engage page, following the page and staying in touch with us, so that to know about all the happenings and activities that we do. For instance, the YAC Talks, the series of online webinars, and one coming up in April that will be dedicated specifically to IUCN World Conservation Congress. You can imagine that there is much planned for youth engagement in the Congress, and for you to have capacity building, be aware of what to expect from the Congress as a young professional, what opportunities and possibilities, and generally what will be happening at the Congress, to attend that webinar and receive all of this information that we're preparing for you so that you could take best advantage and maximum out of your experience in Congress. I very much hope to see you all there. And as said, YAC is represented among other by reps from 7 IUCN commissions. I myself am representing Commission on Education and Communication, and each of these 7 commissions are doing diverse work on youth engagement. When I say diverse, I mean that there are different approaches within each commission. Some have mentorship programs, others hold webinars. In some commissions, there are ways and strategies to ensure that young professionals are working within youth groups and there is peer learning. And without further ado, I would probably pass over to the next presenter, Ibuku, so that she would tell you insights on what's happening in SSC.
All right. Thank you so much, Diana. You're welcome, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening from wherever you're watching from. So wherever you're joining us from. So basically, I'm going to be talking about the role of the Species Survival Commission, which is one of the commissions in the IUCN, and how they are supporting young conservationists. To start with, I'll start with the youth strategy, which Diana has talked about briefly. According to the youth strategy, there are some things that each commission is supposed to do for everyone. One of the things they have to do is to enhance the role of young professionals in commissions. This is by giving leadership roles to young professionals, nominating focal points. In short, ensuring that young professionals are involved in every level of decision making. And to make that possible, they have to ensure that there are capacity building processes like webinars, training, and just to ensure that young professionals are involved. And they have to do this to ensure also to take into recognition in their systems and their programs, and reinvigorate efforts on intergenerational partnership, for instance, to ensure that there's knowledge shared from one generation to another, from the older ones to from professionals to young professionals, for instance. And thirdly, the youth strategy focuses tells commission to ensure that there is less like. Thirdly, the youth strategy speaks to the need for communication and partnerships for commissions. So commissions are supposed to create like a virtual community for young professionals to do this. Now, what exactly is the SSC doing for us? And that is the next slide I'm going to be talking on now. What the SSC has done is to create the Young Professional Task Force. This was created last year, and what the task force is all about is to ensure that young professionals are represented in the SSC, in the specialist groups, in the task forces, in the revenues authorities, and at all levels. And what this has done is that we've been able to speak to specialist groups, and specialist groups are offering training. For instance, the Global Tree Specialist Group is preparing a training for young professionals in global tree assessment. Also, we are speaking with the Conservation Specialist Planning Group, and even some other specialist groups like the Wild Pig, like Cat Specialist Group. They have reached out and said, okay, they're interested in young professionals being in their groups. And because some of us might not have the needed expertise that they need in those groups yet, they are ready to train us. So those are the kind of discussions that we are having, and this is to the end that the number of young professionals will increase in these specialist groups, and then we can begin to appoint focal points in each of these specialist groups. Another thing that has been happening is that chairs, we've been working together with chairs, working together with steering committee members. In the Marine Conservation Committee, for instance, we work closely with them, and they've been, of great help to this to ensure that whatever is happening at the level of each of these committees is accessible to young professionals who are in the IUCN, and that is the things we've been doing. Thirdly is the fact that next slide, please. Thirdly is the fact that we are working on funding. We know that funding is a big thing, And that is why it's not yet a concluded job. It's something we are still talking about. How can funding be available for young professionals in the different work they are doing and everything. And to ensure that there is communication and partnership, like Diana said, we're involved with the IAC. The other co-chair, Ilad, has been facilitating this program, is one representing us in the YAC. And then we have all these wonderful social media pages available. We have on Facebook, we have on X, and we have Instagram and LinkedIn. Next slide, please. So what this means for you is that it's basically an opportunity for you to contribute to species conservation. So I remember before joining the IUCN, I used to look at the IUCN as that thing that is far off and not, attainable to young professionals like me. But with the advent of the youth strategy, the work Diana and her team has been doing, it made it very easy for us to be there. So it's no longer just a group for professionals, it's for everyone. So it's an opportunity for us all to contribute to species conservation. It's an opportunity for us all to learn how to assess. It's an opportunity for us all to learn how to act and plan for conservation. And and the good thing about it is the task force is a community of people just like you. There's nobody that is bigger or smaller. It's just for people just like you. And then, like I said, we are working on funding opportunities, and then we have capacity, internship, and mentorship opportunities. We do webinars. A month ago, we did a webinar on conservation, just chatting about conservation. Now we have several webinars coming up, webinars on what to understand to know how to go about the red list assessment. We encourage members to also do these trainings. We have webinars coming up on conservation planning and things like that. We just want you to know how to translate your research, which is being taught in school, to what can actually drive a species conservation change. And that is majorly what we are doing in the task force, and that's what the SSC has been able to do by creating the Young Professional Task Force for everyone. And so that's it on my hand. Yes.
Thanks, Ibukunoluwa and Diana, for those outstanding talk about the Youth Advisory Committee and the Young Professional Task Force for the SSC. Now, we can open the panel discussion. And for this, we have 15 minutes for questions to the panel members. And after that, we'll open the 10 extra minutes for opening the Q&A section. So please type your questions or comments in the Q&A section. Also share with us where you joining in from. And let's start with this. The first question is meant for Vivek. And it goes like this. What has been the decisive impact of initiatives like research support grants to support your career path, and how have these grants been catalytic?
Okay, as I spoke during my session, finding funds is very hard, especially when you're working with something small like dragonflies or damselflies. So IUCN, basically this funding they did not look for, the larger animals alone. So even if you're studying dragonflies or damselflies, the priority here is to do research on less known and threatened species. So this is one of the only places, funding agencies that was open to such funding. So this really boosted my confidence once I won this. Okay, so I was on the verge of giving up, because when I kept writing proposals to various agencies, and when I was interacting with people usually say you may need to switch your study species. Not many people would fund something like dragonflies or damselflies, but here at IUCN SOS and the Fundación Segre, they do not look for the size of the organisms. They just look if it is threatened and if the proposal is strong enough. And that's something that really changed my career. As I spoke earlier, it really opened a lot of doors for me, because I also did not have any issue in getting research permits. Once you hear the name of IUCN, at least in this part of the world, people are very accepting of the name, and it's a very reputed institution. and promoting good research. So that's how I was able to further my career in conservation biology. Thank you for the question.
Thanks, Vivek. Also, I forgot to introduce to the panel Professor Luigi Boitani, who is also coming, he's joining us in this panel. But first, we got a question for Agus, and it's like, it says, where are the gaps? Where do you think there are still some challenges?
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, I want to second what Vivek has said about limited funding for some taxa. I think most small grants, to say, well, there are many small grants opportunity, but many have specific topic for specific year. So it may not always in line with our project ideas. I was lucky. First of all, I want to say that I was lucky that in 2022, when I was about to conduct my study, the Foundation Save offered a research grant to support PhD student without any restriction on the taxa. So that's why I can apply that year. But then in the following year, this is just an example. The focus of the taxa changed. So of course I could not apply to study my study species. But luckily in this year, the Foundation Sacred topic was for ungulates, which was my study subject. That's why I could apply for that. So that was one of the, I think, some gaps that our project ideas may not always eligible with the grant scopes. Also, most small grants only cover one fiscal year, and 1 year is a very short period to perform a project. Therefore, there are limited options for projects that can be finalized and the results are measurable within 1 year, especially if it's conservation action projects. So that's some thoughts from me. Ilad?
Thanks, Agus. Now we get a question for Professor Luigi, and it says, what motivates funding organizations like Fundación Segre to invest in youth-led conservation?
Well, the answer it would be quite easy, because we believe very much in young people. We are very much aware that if we do not support young people today, we will be without skilled people later on. But there is also another personal reason. I mean, I've been teaching all my life. For 50 years, I've been a professor at the University of Rome. And by the way, I did my thesis on dragonflies, so I know very well what it means and how beautiful they are. And by being a teacher, I've touched myself the lack of support for young people. Very often it's difficult to secure funding for a PhD or for a master. So we at Fundación Segre, we strongly believe in the need to provide support for young conservationists. Provide support for research grant, yes, but our aim is to build a conservationist. So we try to select a research that is strongly conservation oriented. Let me be clear on this. Not all research is equally important for conservation. If you do a research project to study how many times a dragonfly scratched the head, I mean, that's not going to be very useful for conservation. But there are many other research topics that are very important, and we try to select that. We try also to shift the focus of our funding among different taxa, so to give a bit of opportunity to everybody. but of course, our resources are limited, as you have seen, and we cannot open the opportunity to too many students or too many research grants. So we try to do what we can, but we know that is not enough.
Thanks for that, Professor. And don't run away that far from the mic because we got a second question for you. Given your multiple role as founder, university professor, and scientific expert, what is one key action that conservation organization funders or educational institutions should take to better support youth in conservation?
Well, the university could be more keen on conservation. Sometimes they put pressure on students, too much pressure on students to produce research outputs like papers and papers and papers. But with papers, we really, I mean, they are important, absolutely. I'm the first one to acknowledge the need to have a good publication record. But don't forget that to be a conservationist, you don't need too many papers. You just need your skills. So you have to be clear with yourself. You want to be a researcher in your life, then you have to focus on publish, because that's the way you can make a career in research. But if you want to have a career in conservation, what your focus has to build on skills. Accumulate your skills as much as possible. Not paper, but skills. So do a project that allow you to learn as much as possible from people who are more experienced from you or from field staff to acquire as much as possible the skills you need to carry on your conservation projects.
Thanks for that. Now we got a question addressed to Ibuku, and it says, as a co-chair of the IUCN SSC Young Professional Task Force, but also as a recent PhD graduate, where do you think the gaps remain and how can the SSC further support the new generation of students or early career scientists in species conservation?
Thank you for that, Ilad. I would say I'll just continue from where Prof stopped. There's the fact that there is a funding issue, and then we have young conservationists who mostly go to school to do their masters, their PhD. They have all this pressure from the university saying they have to publish papers. They also have pressure from outside the university, from parents, siblings who want to see them succeed and begin a job. And so there is really there is not many of such jobs that cater to you as a conservationist and as a researcher or whatever you want to do. And in some countries, especially developing ones like mine, Nigeria, I come from Nigeria, you don't see many opportunities. I have a background in zoology. They tell you, are you going to work in a zoo once you finish with a degree in zoology? And that is, quite interesting because people cannot see beyond the prospect of working in a zoo. And you cannot blame them. There's not much happening in the country in that front. So where I think an organization like the IUCN can come in is to present opportunities, and that's what they are doing with the task forces, the youth, the YAC. And what they are doing is to ensure that even when, by virtue of survival, you have to work in other companies or organizations, you have to do a white-collar job, for instance, you have the opportunity to put your conservation skills to work. Because IUCN is largely a volunteering organization. Almost all of us in IUCN are volunteers. So you're able to put your skill to work. You know that your conservation skills they are contributing to conservation. So I think that that's something the IUCN does. But where I think there might be need to help step it up is to beyond the communities is also to help with funding opportunities, because conservation is not just something you can do with your hands and your legs and your body. There is also need for money. also to be involved. So that is something. But I think if that can be gotten right, because like I said, a lot of people can't work in the choosing fields they want to because of the needs of their specific country, and that is something the IUCN can do, provide that opportunity for us. Or for instance, if you're in a group and they say they want to do this particular project, then you can say, okay, I want to be part of this project and work on it. So that's something I would say is a gap and how to address it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ibuku, for that. Now we can move to a question addressed for Yiselle, and it says, what advice would you give to aspiring conservationists?
Well, first of all, to knock as many doors as possible. There are many grants out there that we need to reach, and to share with your colleagues and support each other in this way we choose, and to take risks. Sometimes we think that an idea is not big enough to be founded, but if I have learned one thing, it is that even the smallest action, the small data can help. So do not give up, pursue your idea. Our world needs more young people who wants to work on species conservation. So that would be my advice, to keep pushing.
Thanks, Yiselle. That's definitely the best way. You need to be stubborn and go farther.
Yeah.
Now, we can have a question for Diana, and it goes like this. Limited funded is declining field-based education and lack of youth programs and leadership in initiatives are major challenges for young ecologists. How can institutions like IUCN better support youth to gain hands-on experience?
Thank you very much, Ilad. You know, I'm thinking indeed, so many of us can confirm all the struggles and barriers we have faced in our professional development. Finding the first internship or getting that recommendation letter, especially if, for instance, like me, you don't come from any nature conservation directly related field. I'm an economist. So for me, getting into IUCN was a commission as a member was such a big deal. Being among people who are high-profile experts, who are your role models and inspire you, really finding the community. And that could be really one of the solutions for having your first steps in establishing as a young professional, building your network, and one of the tools basically that IUCN provides. Each commission has their own requirements for member selection and the process. But at the end of the day, all of us have different profiles, and one can be a member of technically even probably all the commissions if you wish. And so looking around and finding what speaks to your heart is one of the ways to go forward. Participating at Regional Conservation Forum in the previous cycle also was a great insight into the work of the union, how the governance is happening, how member organizations are putting forward motions and resolutions, understanding the big and complex and fascinating organization that is having a huge impact in nature conservation, and being there at the event, discovering this world for myself, and something I very much encourage you to, stay tuned and look out for in the coming cycle, but also to consider perhaps participating in the World Conservation Congress in Abu Dhabi and follow all the news and opportunities that are related to this event. In October, the Congress website is already up, and you can find more information there. I was mentioning to you before that on the landing page on IUCN website, YAC members are all listed, and you can find your contact point in each of the 7 commissions frankly approach any one of us, regardless the commissions, and you'll be guided and directed who to approach for advice on what's available in your region for the youth networks in particular commissions and so on. All the opportunities for mentorship and activities that are happening for youth engagement and youth empowerment in each commission, but also, like I mentioned, the upcoming YAC webinar on the Congress. In the past, we have held a number of YAC webinars, first dedicated to children and youth in nature conservation. It was on June 1st, so speaking about impact of young professionals, but also children in nature conservation. Having minors as speakers was very important for us. Stay in touch and really make yourself known in your constituency. We're always looking for speakers with all of these webinars. Another way of really getting progress with your professional development is mentorship. And often, from my personal experience, it's very much about having that personal initiative, reaching out with a request for mentorship. It's not necessarily have to be granted, but one of the motions advisory that Youth Advisory Committee has provided when member organizations were reaching out to us was a motion related to mentorship opportunities for young people. And that is something that, you know, is picking up and an important topic that has resonance in youth circles. And having that in mind, I'm very much hopeful this will be even more mainstreamed as an opportunity, but you on your own level, individually, reaching out to those who are your models that you want to be connected with and asking for this opportunity. Intergenerational partnerships and discussions, collaborations that are happening, that I've been observing over the past years in commission that I represent, but also across the union, how approachable and welcoming so many colleagues across the union are. I very much believe that there is a chance to find this opportunity for mentorship, and encourage you to really stay tuned for all the communication that is happening on all the youth opportunities in commissions, in the union, funding or not funding related.
Thanks, Diana. Stay around for one more question. What is the process to get involved into IUCN Youth Advisory Committee, and who the resource people, regional coordinators for the same? Are the necessary experience and skills needed for be part of the JAC?
I'm sorry, this question was addressed to...
Yeah, to you, Diana, to you.
Well, YAC is constituted, right? It's a committee, it's not a youth constituency. And as I mentioned, it was designed having in mind this approach to union-wide implementation of the youth strategy. And as I mentioned, it represents really every part of the union, with member organizations being represented on YAC, commission representatives, secretariat, indigenous people organizations, and this cohort is there to last until basically the end of this term. And again, stay tuned for the upcoming cycle and the calls that we can expect for the intake of the next cohort. Very recently, one of the commissions, in fact, had a very wide call for members, but specifically to identify a representative coming from them. And I would even expect, and perhaps this is something for you to pay attention to, in one of the commissions, there will soon be another call. So stay tuned and really watch out for all of this communication.
Right. Thanks for that. We get one more question for Ibuku. and it says, what is the process to have a country coordinator representative for youth in the different countries? For example, we have a participant for Uganda. How does this work?
All right, thank you for the question. So basically, the way we members, when people approach us that they want to be part of the Young Professional Task Force, we currently have regional coordinators because we are just new and starting. What we have is regional coordinators in 5 regions for now. We have for Asia, we have for America, we have for Africa. We've joined some regions together again because we are just starting off. The idea is with time, these regional coordinators will then choose country representatives. But for now, we have regional coordinators, and the way we do it for you to become a member is when you approach us and say you want to be a member of the task force, we then send you to the regional coordinators, because joining is also by invitation. So they look at your what are you doing, what skills do you have a degree in biodiversity, and check all of those things. Are you within the age range of a young professional? Once they have all those questions right, then you can then apply on the IUCN Commission website. Then you apply to be a member, then your application is reviewed, and then you are accepted. Then you begin to work as part of whatsoever they are doing in that region. And yes, we are looking forward to selecting country representatives, but that's not right now. That'll be later in the year or sometimes later. Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Ibuku, and all the panelists for answering these questions and all these outstanding answers. Now, for some closing remarks, today, these discussions has reinforced 3 key messages. The first is we must strengthen opportunities for young conservationists through mentorship, funding, and career pathways that allows them to thrive. The second one is hand-on experience is vital. We must support young conservationists in accessing field-based learning. And the third one is collaboration is key. Connection between conservationist experts, conservation organizations, and donors will amplify impact and drive lasting changes. This conservation does not end here. Each of us has a role to play in shaping the future of conservation. So once again, thank you all for your participation in today's discussion, and hope to see you in our next webinar. And now, here we're sharing some of the commissions with QR codes so you get information for all these panelists and the representative of young engagement. And now we can give the mic to Diana for her closing remarks.
I trust all of this experience of building youth networks and structures, events that had very strategically engaged young professionals to be part of the events, meaningfully engaged and contributing as young professionals to the design of the regional conservation fora, engagement of other young professionals during these events. All the information and facts that was mentioned about the efforts for youth engagement in the Congress, opportunities of youth empowerment and youth leadership development in the commissions, all keep you empowered with tools and very concrete plan of action, actually. All of these ideas that were shared for enhancing your professional development, the best practices and success stories that were heard in the beginning of the webinar. All of this exists and is available to every young person on this webinar and those out there in the nature conservation community. Spread the word, do your work in engaging yourself. All of these opportunities and entry points are there. And sometimes it's really up to us to take that step forward, not hesitate, and make the dreams and aspirations a reality. I wish you best of luck in your journeys, and it was amazing to have the opportunity to participate in this event. Thanks once again to the organizers and fantastic moderation from Ilad.
Ilad, I also would like to thank you all for being here with us today. From my side, I just wanted to say that we've heard about barriers, challenges, guidance, and I hope that we've been able to provide you to the young conservationists that have heard us today. I understand that there were lots of students from many universities across the world hearing this webinar. So I hope that we've provided you with some answers and opportunities today. You've heard about how you can connect with IUCN, with the YAC, with the committee, with the Species Survival Commission. We also I also saw some messages in the chat from the Rufor Foundation with more grants available for you to engage. So I hope that you have found the stories engaging and also as a resource for future engagement. From my side, young conservationists, you are making a massive difference. You've demonstrated today with what you have presented. I think it's very important to continue supporting youth, investing and also learning from the work that is being generated. Supporting young conservationists is not just an investment in the future, but it's also a commitment to ensuring that conservation today is bold, inclusive and effective. Thank you, Ilad, for facilitating the discussion. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you to Fundación Segre for making this happen. And I'll see you all at the next webinar. Bye-bye.